Hey, welcome back to IR Insight Live. I'm your host, Will Briganti from Nasdaq, and joining me here at the NERI 2018 annual conference is Simon Mays-Smith. He's a partner at BrunswickGroup. Simon, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Good to be here.
So we just finished up a panel on ESG and the shift from active to passive.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to us a little bit about the communication side of this. So one thing that you said during the panel that struck me as poignant was using ESG as a way to communicate your risk narrative. So talk to our audience a bit about that.
So just to sort of frame it for a bit, one of my sort of key bits of advice for companies is to have what I call a North Star narrative, which is the point on the horizon that they're heading towards strategically, and why that is both financially and emotionally appealing. On the financial side, it's the obvious things, revenues, margins, and cash, and the operating factors that feed into that. The emotional side is having some form of purpose, or what I call a license to operate narrative, which gives employees and customers a good feeling about working for and buying your product, and it also gives you a fair hearing from media and government if you're approaching them. And the way that narrative then feeds out across the universe is if you think about something going wrong, let's say a cybersecurity hack, that sends a shockwave out externally to your customers, to media, and to government and regulators. But it also sends a shockwave out internally to your employees, to your management team and board, and then to your shareholders. And what you have to do when a shock like that happens is manage the communication across all of those different channels with the same basis, the same narrative and source of communication. Yeah, of and what you'll often find is if you've got a well-crafted and well-thought-out ESG report, that can form the basis of that communication. And what it means is in a crisis that you are 2 steps ahead of the wave of crisis as it happens, with a narrative that's well thought through, that has risk management processes underneath it, which not only helps you to react to the crisis, but then also communicate it externally to stakeholders of what's going on.
Right, so how should corporates start to be thinking about this? I mean, I think oftentimes when they think of reporting, it's either on the annual cycle or half year or quarterly cycle as they prepare their earnings statements. What do you see as the best way? Because again, this is still early days here in the US particularly for how IR professionals can be thinking about this and working with their communications teams. So what would be your advice on how to really kind of enact that going forward for companies?
So there's a sort of strategic answer and then a sort of tactical answer. The strategic answer is a sort of communication advice, which is when you have your North Star narrative and have defined it maybe in an investor day as a long form of storytelling, using your quarterly results to feed in and reinforce the storytelling. So environmental, social and governance, feeding in those stories on a quarterly basis to reinforce the narrative. On a tactical side, I always, as an IRO, as I used to be in my previous life, is find out where consensus is. And consensus is, in the ESG world, is what is written in the MSCI ESG report and in the Sustainalytics report. I always say make sure that you have a glass of whiskey in hand when you're reading those reports, because they can be quite an eye-opener. But once you have those 2 reports and have read them, you will know where the market is, where most shareholders who use those 2 reports as core inputs, what their core input will read. And then once you know that, you can then go about how do you shape consensus in a way that you want it to be.
Yeah. Awesome. Simon Mays-Smith, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good to see you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was Simon Mays-Smith. He's a partner at BrunswickGroup. We're talking here at the NERI 2018 annual conference. Thanks so much for tuning in to IR Insight Live. We'll see you next time.